The purpose of my role is to improve the working world so that my kids have a better experience entering the job market than I did. Gen Z don't aspire to become managers, and millennials are burned out by leadership expectations because it feels thankless, underpaid, and all-consuming. This isn't just a generational attitude problem. This is like a wake-up call for employers. We're heading into a leadership gap if companies don't start to...
Welcome to Workplus, the podcast that shines a light on the people doing good work across Northern Ireland. I'm your host, Richard Kirk, founder of Workplus. I've spent years working with employers, schools, colleges and universities, helping young people and career changers to make better informed career decisions. Each week, I sit down with real people doing real jobs to explore how they got there, what they've learned, and why their work matters. If you're a parent, teacher, carer, or just curious about what good work looks like today, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Susan.
Yeah.
Delighted to have you with us today on the podcast.
Thank you. I do feel like we've been talking about this a long time. So
we
thanks.
have. I actually came to you and I was saying, what do you think HR professionals need to hear as well? So that was helpful, and you gave me a few things. I guess our audience is HR professionals, but it's also parents and, those who are helping young people to make career decisions as well. So we hope this will be a wide-ranging conversation today, but even from your accent that we've just heard, you're not from around these parts. But tell us about how you found your way from Boston to Belfast.
I don't know what gave it away, but people back home in Boston, they actually say I don't have I don't sound like I'm from there anymore. And I'm like, well, where do I sound like I'm from? But no, yes, I did grow up in Boston. My background is in fashion retail in America. So I spent a lot of time, if anyone knows Boston, on Newbury Street, and then moving my career to New York, which is obviously, the mecca for fashion retail. Specifically, I worked in denim for a lot of years. So if you ever want to chat about selvage or twill weave and warp threads, I am your person. But yeah, it's interesting in America, retail and fashion retail specifically, like you're earning six figures when you're in your early 20s. Like you're running businesses that are multi-million-dollar companies. So working in a flagship in Soho in Manhattan, comparing that to the, general managers who are working on Regent Street in London, like it's just completely different. And I think the people who are running these shops in London, specifically where I moved to when I first left America, I think they can be massively undervalued and lacking a sense of identity in some of these stores. And in a lot of cases, the labor is quite cheap, which is where you see this kind of decline in customer service. Yeah, and I would say that's one of the starkest comparisons between American retail and British retail, right? Is everyone says the customer service is very different. So when I first moved to London, I started looking at where could I build culture, cultivate teams, really work on engagement, because those were my core skill sets. I was lucky enough to work in Selfridges. I worked with a brand called Kate Spade, which you might know, but these are very identifiable brands and they deliver an experience to their customers. And that to me was what drew me into the people side of it and being in the people profession. So it's not dissimilar to how HR would deliver onboarding experiences to kind of drive culture within an organization. And the thing I like most about retail and fashion, it's believing in this brand, this core purpose, right? So you have very identifiable values. Culture is huge. You buy into the story of that brand and then you sell that story to customers through your goods and products and services. And I think if more organizations kind of had a clear outline of their why and their purpose, they they would see greater levels of excitement with their employees and feeling like they could contribute to that success. So in retail, it's a very quick win, right? You would hit your numbers at the end of the day, you celebrate with your team, and then you do it all again tomorrow. Whereas I think with organizations, it's a longer game for that enthusiasm, but you can still get people to buy into it. And I guess going back to your question, one of the biggest surprises for me in moving from Boston to how I ended up in Belfast was like meeting my husband. He's British. We, eventually decided London wasn't the long-term place for us. He's from Manchester. Don't hate him. And we were kind of looking at like long-term, where's a good place to be? And we'll talk about this in a little while, I hope. But Belfast and Northern Ireland in general is a great place to have a family and to like raise your kids. I don't know if you were brought up here like locally, but it is just a brilliant experience for my children. So we definitely made the right decision looking around the UK for places to kind of end up. And luckily CIPD had opportunities here for me. So yeah, long story short, that's great. How I got here.
No, good. You mentioned a bit about going into fashion retail and the skills that you developed. So like when you were going through, through school, college or whatever, like, did you have a strong sense of like, these are the things that I'm good at? Or were you just living it and you didn't really think too much about it?
So I think I went to school for business economics. I learned a lot about how organizations work, what makes successful businesses. And so I always knew I was going to work in that sort of area. But of course, as a university student, you're desperate for a part-time job. And mine just happened to be in retail. And I loved it. I loved like chatting to people. I loved having, being on a team. I really liked our like combined purpose of having a goal. And I really connected with the brand at an early age when I was in university. So I think that just sort of was a natural progression for me. The most sort of influential and impactful person at the early stages of my career would have been an L&D manager or an L&D practitioner.
So they were learning and development.
Learning and development. They were really engaging. They really sold me the Kool-Aid, I drank it and I was like all in. And I thought they were a really amazing example of how to communicate to others, how to engage people. And it was just, a really good experience. I would say once I graduated, my jobs varied in terms of level of job satisfaction and how valued I felt as an employee, which is why eventually working in HR, and I'll say this a million times to everyone who will listen, the purpose of my role is to improve the working world so that my kids have a better experience entering the job market than I did. Because I think for a lot of us, especially back in the early 2000s, there was a lot of stuff going on in organizations, in retail environments it was not okay. So, I think working in a position where I have influence to help change that for people, fairer work practices, it's really important to me. Yeah.
So CIPD is the professional body for the individuals working in HR, talent, L&D roles across the world.
So, we are a global organization, and we basically set the standards for what good working practices look like. And for me, it's about champion those good working practices. We have something called the profession map, which helps people in all different situations. It can, be a gauge to help you progress in your career. It can be a career pathway. It can set good standards of best practice for your organization. And we utilize that all the time in conversations just to, measure where people are being successful and where they have opportunities. And I just think having those sets of standards to say, this is okay, this is good behavior and this is behavior that needs to change. Like that would have been really useful for me early on in my career, just being able to say leadership skills sets are not where they need to be. This is not the type of behavior we need to see in the organization, but you don't have those skills all the time early on. So that's why I love my job, is because I am talking to employers about how we can create more just better work practices for their people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you're obviously doing that through your members. There are a lot of small businesses, micro businesses that don't have an L&D or HR professional, but yet there are so many of the jobs across our economy. So, like, how does someone in a micro business, manage well when they don't have an HR qualification? They're not a member of CIPD. Like, how does that?
Or they don't even have like an HR person. I mean, a lot of SMEs that I work with in Northern Ireland will be outsourcing their HR function to an independent consultant. And CIPD obviously supports independent consultants who work in all different sectors and industry to help them go in and set good standards of best practice. But I would say for those organizations who can't even afford that outsourcing, like, there is a lot of CIPD content that's free that you can use to build leadership skills. I mean, look, there's content out on the internet everywhere that can help you do this. But I think the first person that comes to mind is Carol Fitzsimon. She's the chief exec at Young Enterprise Northern Ireland. She said, one of the first times I met her, she said, you don't have to work in HR to be a people professional. And she leads with that example in her organization where she doesn't have a dedicated HR person, but everyone in her team knows how to have those leadership skill sets to manage people properly so that they can thrive in their roles. And I think that's really important, just to have those core behaviors and that core knowledge to have a positive impact.
So in terms of, you mentioned earlier about organizations not really understanding their why, and retail it's a daily thing. It's almost like a sprint every day that you can then celebrate at the end of, and then you go again the next day, you go again. Why do you think a lot of companies don't really have that sense of their why? And because if you're so inspired by so many of us are so inspired by, what on earth are we here for in this organization? Why do we turn up every day? Why is it that so many businesses don't have that?
I know. I think it's, part of it is identifying your purpose. And sometimes that can get a bit muddled. Like that story always comes back to me about, John F. Kennedy went to NASA and spoke to the janitor, and he said, "What are you doing?" as he was mopping the floor. And he said, "I'm putting a man on the moon." And so, like, that whole, I'm invested in this. I know what our purpose is and I'm a part of it, no matter what my role is, how small it is, or how insignificant you might think it is. And I think when we're talking about culture, and when we're talking about how we bring people in, talk about our core values, relate to them on their level, because you want people who are working for you that can really relate. They feel like, oh yes, my values are the same as yours. And that's how you kind of build that culture. There are lots of ways to build culture. I won't get into all of them, but I think that you have to be really clear with your purpose. And when you're doing your recruitment and your hiring, you need to be looking at people who share in the same values, have the same interests. And those interests might change over time, and that's fine. That's what turnover is all about, getting fresh perspectives in the door. But initially, you want to make sure that the people on your team all have the same passion.
As you meet with the people profession and all the people that includes, what are some of the big issues that you're hearing right now?
Oh gosh. I mean, that's a big question. There's a lot of issues that I'm kind of hearing all of the time. I mean, first of all, when I speak to our membership, there's a lot of grumbling going on right now about the potential costs of this new legislation that's coming in with the Good Jobs Bill. So it's mostly around pay transparency. There are loads of SMEs. I think it's like 80% of Northern Ireland is SME.
Oh, yeah.
And, we've got to start somewhere, but structural realignments and introducing pay bands can be a very disruptive process. And it can be very costly. And when employees feel that their work is undervalued, I mean, that's what we're discussing. We've got an event coming up on the 17th at our reward network, and we're going to be discussing the pay transparency and the legislation that's coming in. But it's definitely at the top of people's agenda, especially when they feel like we don't have the money to change our processes and to do this reporting that they want, or to put in pay bands. And then we might lose some people because you'll be at the top of a pay band and I'll be at the bottom, but we do the same job. Only one of us is male and one of us is female. So, it's that kind of apprehension, but it's coming. And I think it can be a step in the right direction. And we're trying to support our people through that process. I mean, if I was to talk to you about the biggest workplace shift that I think no one is ready for, is that there's a growing trend I'm seeing with Gen Zs and millennials who are walking away from the traditional path to management. So according to a recent article I saw, like Gen Z don't aspire to become managers, and millennials are burned out by leadership expectations because it feels thankless, underpaid, and all-consuming. And I'm completely generalizing here, but this isn't just a generational attitude problem. This is like a wake-up call for employers. Speaking to recruiters, I have really good relationships with recruiters locally, but they're trying for months to place executives and advising organizations that we're heading into a leadership gap if companies don't start to rethink how they build teams, how they incentivize, and really support people leadership. So yeah, I think we're really heading into this big leadership gap, and nobody's talking about it. But young professionals today, right? So if you think about people who are joining the workforce, they want impact over authority. They want autonomy over hierarchy. They want flexibility over rigidity. So these are things that they're asking for, but we're like pushing people to get promoted up the corporate ladder in a way that seems really outdated. But actually, if we redesign leadership paths and, if people actually want to walk down them, then we'll be focusing more on like maybe investing in mentorship programs or reframing the leadership beyond managing people and kind of looking at how those leadership paths would align to more modern values. And I think that's the key, is we need to think about what they want, because what they don't want is the responsibility of being a manager. And that's what report after report is telling us. Even in my own organization, and, CIPD has very fair working practices. But if you think about a couple of years ago, even, we were talking about the 4-day work week and flexible hybrid working and what's this doing to productivity? And now there's all this talk about like return to the office, and everybody needs to be in the office 3 days a week. And if you want this senior management job, you need to be in the office. And so it's like, well, okay, where are we shifting? It just seems to be moving away from the hybrid models that we were all kind of aspiring to.
What do you think there is a reason for that, though, moving back to the office?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in the productivity studies that we saw from organizations who did 4-day work weeks, there was no real evidence that showed productivity was so much better than people who were working 5 days a week in a hybrid situation or working in an office 3 days a week. So I think it depends on the person. I think it depends on the role. But I also think if we're seeing this gap in leadership, we need to be widening our nets, not narrowing them.
Yeah. But like you talked about, I know it's retail. You talked about being in a place with a group of people, in a team, and being inspired each day to hit your targets and then celebrate at the end of it. Are we missing something if we're not going to have people coming together in teams rather than just using teams?
No. I absolutely think there's like a place for having that face-to-face. But I think back to my days in retail in Manhattan, for example. I mean, I was working about 70 hours a week, 80 hours sometimes during Christmas. So the quality of your work-life balance is completely skewed. And that's the responsibility of a senior manager in that sector. But if the option for job sharing, or if the option for me to flex my own hours, or if there was an option for me to work nights over a certain period and then have 2 or 3 days off. Like if there were options for me, that's what I mean when I say flexibility. It doesn't necessarily have to be hybrid work at home. It doesn't necessarily mean 4-day work week. It's not rigid. What I'm saying is we need to open up the opportunities for flexible working, which could be a range of things. I think my experience tells me I would have been so much more productive if I had more autonomy over when I was working and the impact that had. Retail is a hard business. You're open 12 hours a day. You're not going to work that whole 12 hours. The person who did the morning shift isn't going to be celebrating with you when you close the doors, but they still know that they contributed to the day. And that, I think, is the message that organizations need to hear is, how am I contributing even if I'm not seeing the end result immediately? Do I still feel like I was successful in enabling that to happen?
Yeah. There's a lot in that good jobs bill, as you say. It's a huge piece of legislation. It's been costed though, hasn't it? The impact, I think, has been costed. But what you're saying is there are costs that your profession are saying.
Yeah, people are still nervous about it. They're still nervous about the disruption that it could, cause.
Almost the cost of disruption, so to speak, rather than actually the cost of implementing it or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, the last thing that people are really going on about, and this won't be a surprise to you because it's at every conference and it seems to be on every podcast I listen to, is AI, right? So it's inescapable at this point. The implementation of it is massive. The first thing I would do if I was a student, a young professional, an old professional, like anybody, is to learn AI skills. You have to learn AI skills. Like everyone needs to learn this, and they just need to be interacting with it every day. It's reshaping industry workflows. It's impacting hiring decisions. It's like changing career pathways for people. And it's not about, being a coder or really understanding the ins and outs of it, but it's just being AI literate, learning prompt engineering, for example, and how to use AI as a real assistant. I don't know if you were at the CIPD conference last month, but we saw at the conference how AI can be your personal assistant, how it can help you with your work, how it can just be your tasker. And it's, formed on the screen as this real person, but it doesn't need to be. But yeah, I would say the landscape is evolving so fast. Start small, get your hands on tools like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini Pro, like play around with them and experiment. I mean, do you have Alexa?
I don't have Alexa, and I've never really wanted to have Alexa in my life.
I don't know what I would do without Alexa at this point.
Okay.
I literally don't know what I would do.
So that's at home, you're using it?
Yeah. Like as soon as I walk in the door, Alexa is there to help me.
Right, okay.
It's like, set the timer. Check on this. Who dropped off what was the deliveries today? Like who came to the door? Like all of it. And it's really, I don't know what I did before.
Well, we can use it. We're using it in a work context, but not in home life. I've started to turn off my microphones on all my apps.
Have you?
Oh yeah, I don't. Yeah.
Is Russia listening?
Maybe,
is it China?
Well, it's whenever the suggestions are coming in, you're like, that's literally what we were just talking about.
Oh, yeah.
No, maybe.
See, I love that. I think that the suggestions are like, some of them are spot on. I'm like, yes, thank you. But no, I think it's really interesting because these AI tools in work-related instances, like, just ask them to help you write something, research something, help you get organized, help you brainstorm. The real advantage of someone who's really good at prompting AI is someone who knows how to frame the right questions and guide the tool. I mean, this isn't different. This is no different from the skills you need to lead a high-performing team. These are the same skills.
Okay, so what are those skills then?
If you think about it, let's say you graduated from university and you didn't know how to use the internet or email or Excel spreadsheets, like you would be unemployable. And AI is the next evolution of that baseline skill set. The professionals who know how to work with AI, they know how to think critically, They know how to prompt effectively and lead an AI supported team. So they're not just staying relevant, but they're like pulling ahead. And those are the same critical thinking skills that you've got in a team leader, an effective one anyway. But I also think, yes, it's going to take some art and science to use AI really effectively. But if you can master it, you're going to be working faster and thinking smarter and making yourself indispensable. And at the end of the day, you just need to be asking yourself, how can this help me do my job better? Because that's where the real advantage is, I think, for people.
So you talked about AI literacy. How far back in someone's life, let's say, how should that extend? Like, you've got, like, we've both got children, right?
Yeah.
So, like, how far back? Like, when should you start to become literate with AI?
It's like really,
remember your kids are using
AI. Moral
Alexa.
Question.
That's okay.
Yes. So my children know how to speak to Alexa. They only have Alexa in the kitchen, right? So it's not in their bedrooms. They can't say to Alexa, like, are you my friend? Do you like me? Those are kind of the scary questions you don't want your kids to be prompting. I would say my kids will ask Alexa in the kitchen to read them an audiobook or play a Disney song that they like. Like, they know how to do that. And my children are 5 and 7. My kids don't have screens, so they don't have tablets. The only TV time they get, and my husband will back me up on this, unless I'm not home and he's turning it on. But my kids get a movie night during the weekend, and they'll wake up on a Saturday or Sunday and watch like cartoons that we've selected for them. So apart from that, there's no TV during the school week, and they don't get screen time, which means they probably are behind a lot of kids when it comes to technology. That's where I personally stand on that. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know, but I don't believe my kids should have access to AI tools. I think the right point to start training people is when we're thinking about entering the workplace. So maybe in like 14, 15, 16 plus, I think that's when you have to start building things for your career longevity, apart from communication, apart from confidence and presentation delivery, apart from those skills that we can be teaching much earlier on.
You're applying them, so they're developing communication, listening, teamwork, all those core transversal skills. They're just not applying it and not being sucked into a technological device at that stage. But once they get a bit further up and start to think about careers.
I definitely think there's a place for it in schools, but like even now, my kids' school, they like teach them things on a screen. And I'm like, why are you doing this? Bring back the chalkboard. But I think there's lots of debate amongst parents and teachers as well as to like how effective digital learning is. Personally...
Well, the reason that there were green chalkboards was because green is a colour that's soothing on the eyes. Like, that's why.
I did not know that. And now we're like putting all these bright, flashy lights.
Exactly.
In their eyes.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
You know what? There's a future in optometry.
It could be a robot doing it that comes to your house.
This is true.
Well, we'll peel away from our dystopian future here. But one of the things that we've picked up when we're talking to people in talent or HR roles is the tight labour market right now. So really tight, like single figures, like 2-3% unemployment rate. But yet there's this high level of skills shortage vacancies, which I think in the latest report was up to 36%. So over a third of employers are saying we've got vacancies that are vacant, not because we can't find people, but we can't find the people with the skills, qualifications or experience to do the job. So what are some of the ways that your members are maybe trying to address their skills shortage vacancies? Do you have a sense of your alternative pathways or like
look, I've been a huge fan of Workplus for years because I believe more employers need to look at adding more routes to employment to their portfolio. Like we have to get more people into, or just open up the opportunities. Like I said earlier, widen the net and let's bring people in. Let's look at the actual criteria that we're asking people to have for jobs, because some of them, I mean, I remember when I first moved here, I was working with an employer and they were asking for like a bachelor's degree for a job that did not require a bachelor's degree. And I was like, why is this, something that is a non-negotiable for you? You're missing a trick here. Or I would even, when I first moved to London, I would apply for different roles, looking at different retailers, and every job opportunity that I wanted was asking for a CIPD qualification. Now, I had a Society of HR Management qualification from America, but I didn't even know what CIPD was back then. Right. I mean, we're going back to 2013, but I was like, why? I could not get a job. Whereas if those employers had hired me and said, we'd really like you to have a CIPD qualification, could we partially fund that for you? Or would that be something you'd be open to? I would have been over the moon. Another piece of my learning and development, absolutely. Let's do it. But I didn't even get through the SIFT. And this is like a huge problem. So I think employers need to really look at what they're asking for. And in terms of like looking at routes to employment as a priority, apprenticeships and apprenticeship degrees are such a good way to engage those people who are economically inactive. We heard last week from Gordon at the Green Skills Action launch. Gordon Parks, yeah. We heard that, there's a staggering numbers of people who are economically inactive. But once we can get them to buy into the brand and what we're doing, and we begin growing our own, as Gordon would have say, then you have that commitment to purpose very early on. And once you've got that commitment to purpose, the skills can be taught, the qualifications can be part of their learning and development and their ongoing training, but we just need to get them in first. And I think there's a big pool of people who would rather work in a job that they find meaning and purposefulness in than, just go somewhere because they've got the right qualifications.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I get that. Well, you mentioned Gordon Parks, and Gordon has been a huge advocate of growing their own talent, and they've been invested in a very technical apprenticeship for decades. A lot of their now senior managers came through that route. Yeah. But they've also looked at higher level apprenticeships in different areas like finance and cyber and all those things as well. Sure. So, but yet Gordon does talk about the stats around that, and that less than 10% of employers here use apprenticeships as a talent pathway, but 32% say they want to. So there's this gap between what's happening now and what could possibly happen. So even in the context of what you've just said around the specification of a job description and pathways and all of that, what do you think needs to change with HR managers or managing directors of small firms to start to change that mindset? We're
going to get to a point where the demographics are a problem and people are going to have their hands tied. They won't really have a choice. I mean, you only need to look at how many primary schools have closed in the last, decade to know that people are having less children and there's going to be less talent out there. But I think for HR practitioners that I speak to, like putting someone through an apprenticeship to them is like either an outlying cost or it's complicated or they just don't know how to do it. And if they could understand a bit more about the benefits of that route to employment, I think they would have much more of a case study to go to the board and say, look, this is what we need to add. But when it comes to, the demographics, I just want to, as a side note, say what surprises me most about living in Northern Ireland is the amount of people I meet who do come back. They come back. So what I mean by that is I have hope that there will be more, because young people, right, they tend to graduate or leave before they go to university and they just don't come back straight away. And so we're seeing this like outpouring of young talent leaving. But in America, when I pick up my kids from school, who's there to pick them up? It's either parents, babysitters, nannies, like after school care clubs are a really big thing over there. When I pick up my kids from school here, it's the grandparents, the auntie, it's the support network that family has, or the parents. And so I think that there's something to be said about that village vibe that Northern Ireland gives off, right? I mean, people are shocked when I tell them that I've had my kids and I've raised my kids and I've done all this alone with no family support around. And the only support I do have is the after school clubs and the nurseries and, the childcare facilities. But virtually in America, I don't know a single person who lives in a neighborhood close to their family, their parents. I don't know anyone who lives in a neighborhood, the same neighborhood they grew up in, certainly not. But being here, it is such a lovely place to raise their kids. I see why people do come back to it. And, that does give me some hope that if the employers are asking the right questions, we're going to start to see those roles being filled, especially the senior roles where there's gaps. But yeah, back to your question. I was listening to a podcast yesterday on skills, as I do, the CIPD one, just to plug that. And the question was, are we more inclined to invest in skills when you know what the future requirements will be? So where does this onus sit around skills? Is it the profession that needs to drive it? Is it to be driven by education? Like, where do we think that sits? And how do we create work environments where people can actually thrive? And Dr. Adrian Waite, who is the head of talent and leadership, he's really well known. I'll quote him because it was really interesting what he said. He said, by looking at skills outside of the context of application, you're looking at skills and you're not looking at where they're being performed. You're not looking at the systems in which they're working. You're not looking at the context and the workflow and the crosses between teams. And you're just looking at skills in isolation, which is a huge mistake. We aren't colleges. We aren't in the education business. We are in the performance business. So let's look at skills within the role taxonomy. We don't develop skills outside of the context of performance. Developing skills needs to see outcomes of performance, and we need that performance in order to do the reflective practice so that we can then again develop the skills. So it's the cyclical cycle. But yeah, it was really interesting because I thought we're focusing so much on what skills do our young people need in order to do jobs of the future. But if the organizations with the jobs of the future don't have that infrastructure set up, how do we actually know what the skills are going to be? And so it's this catch-22 that I kept going around with. And my thoughts are there is going to be a shift required in capability. And more HR practitioners need to be looking at apprenticeships as a route to employment so that they're getting both the practical hands-on knowledge in the workplace as well as the education. Yep. But you need a strategic plan to provide people with new skills to succeed in the role. And employers should really be focusing not just on how we can get more employability into the workplace, but the systems and building that infrastructure to support that. And I do remember at the Green Skills launch last week, they did mention we need to get the infrastructure right. And we talked about that as well.
Yeah, I think it was summed up really well by Jonathan Martindale from Phoenix, who talked about three things. And he said, first of all, we need to understand what the skills requirements are. Mm-hmm. Then we need to design the pathways that people can get to that destination. And then we need to get the people. Yeah. So there's, it was really, I just thought it was a really succinct way of laying it out. But the difficult bit is actually agreeing, if we've got this, we've only got we've got a level of confidence about what we need. And it's the same with every decision we make it's only a decision because there's imperfect information.
Exactly. We're having a guess, throwing darts at the wall.
Exactly. It's just, do you have how open to have your eyes, or how big is the dartboard? But there's a real challenge there. But But I like the way, I love the way he articulated that in that podcast as well, what you've just quoted there.
It was really interesting because I often think about, we need, these young people who are, even my children who are in school, like what skills do they need? Like, we don't know yet. We don't know. Half of the jobs that you see on, the job posts right now, they're not even going to exist in 20 years' time. They will not be, like, who knows what it's going to be. Don't get into the truck driving business or anything like that.
That was my next career move, Susan. Thank you for the advice.
But, I see more and more things like automation this, automation that. Yeah. I had a plumber come around because we had a leak this is back in Boston in my cousin's house. And the plumber came around to check the leak. He didn't pick up a single tool. But you know what he did need to know how to do? Was manage a drone to go up on the roof and look at the damage, assess what needed to be done. Like, never got up on a ladder. Did not, like, this is the job of the plumber of the future. You need to be handy with a drone. And you need to be handy with, like, being able to use optic lasers to fix things. Okay. Like, this is how we're progressing.
Yeah. But there's still that need to be personal with a client or customer.
Yeah, of
course. There's that part of it. And there was a podcast I was watching a few days ago about AI, and it talked about the Tesla Optimus, which is this humanoid thing, which terrifies me. But it talked about plumbing being on. That this is going to be able to plumb.
Yeah.
And now, there are greater minds out there than mine, but I'm thinking to myself, well, how? Like, you're not still going to need to have a person. But I suppose it comes back to, like, the reason why truck drivers are under threat is they're doing a task, so to speak, and gaslighters, are people who lit gas lights. That was a task.
Yeah.
And there's one of the slides that my colleague Lucy would use when we go to schools and we're talking about jobs that don't exist anymore. It's just this sort of grubby-faced man in his 60s and black and white. We can maybe put it up on the photo up at this point, but he's got this metal rod in his hands. And again, like, this job was called a waker-upper. Yeah. Like, genuinely, he used to go around tapping the windows.
I've got that guy in my neighborhood now.
Do you? Yeah. So he's still they're still alive and well. That heritage is being crafted. Yeah. But the reason why his job is not there is because his job wasn't it was a job, but it was a task.
Yeah,
it was to wake people up, and I think that's where, like, what you talked about earlier about kids and learning creativity, ability to listen, to communicate, to work as part of a team. All those things are going to be really helpful in any generation. And you've got this chance then for them to, because they've developed these wider life skills, to be able then to adapt and go, well, this is how I'll use this technology or this tool to do X, Y, or Z for that particular problem that you and I don't even think about now.
Agreed.
And then whilst we think about the future, if there was one thing, like if we were sitting here in 2035 and there was one thing that you'd want to change about working practice or skills or whatever, and if you had the power to be able to do that, what would it be?
I mean, so hard because it's almost like a knock-on effect, right? So once you can make change in one area, it's just going to hopefully make change in the rest. Like, at first, I would think education is going to be the fastest way to get people thinking about jobs of the future. But I think it needs to be both workplace design and education. So one of the fastest growing industries in Northern Ireland at the moment is film and media. And we offer 0 creative industries courses for, like, children in schools, right? And I just think that jobs of the future need to start in early years education. And, personal opinion, I think the CIAG exam needs to go. I think it's not it's fundamentally not a good time to do testing. I don't see the results as being, like, relevant or useful, but I do think education needs to change. I'd love to see more education around jobs for the future where, I do a lot of volunteer work, I said, with Carol and Young Enterprise Northern Ireland, and the career aspirations of young people are shocking, Richard. Like, they think stewardesses on flights are glamorous, travel jobs. And it's instead of, life-saving support workers in an office in the sky. That's really what they are. And, if I hear one more 14-year-old kid tell me he's going to be a famous footballer, I'm like, the odds are against you, mate. And I don't want to, obviously I'm volunteering. I would never say that to a child. But in order to succeed in their career, you can be what you see, right? And that is a motto I've always said is you can be what you see. We need to see more digital film technicians coming into schools. We need to see people who work in robotics come into schools. A very good friend of mine from school, another school mom, she is a thoracic surgeon. She is the only thoracic surgeon in Northern Ireland who uses robotics to do the surgeries. And she is fully trained and she is brilliant, but she is using this robotics skill set to do the surgery. So even though she's a trained practitioner, my cousin in America is the same way. She's a physician's assistant, but she started off, in her early education as a paramedic. And now paramedics have these robotics assistants to lift patients because she really ruined her body doing all that physical work. So it's really interesting. I mean, I think these kids need to look at STEM careers. They need to be looking at what researchers are doing. And we need those people to come in and talk to them about how cool their job is. Those are the jobs of the future. I don't want to hear about footballers and airline stewardesses. Not that there is anything wrong with doing those jobs. But yeah, if I had to change one thing, I think it would start with education and then go back to looking at how we're organizing the systems in companies to support these new initiatives.
Yeah. So if you were talking to, say, a 14-year-old who didn't want to be a professional footballer, but you wanted to encourage them to do something better, which is to work in HR, right?
Yeah,
okay. So what are the messages you try and share with someone at the age of 14 thinking about a career or their parents? If you were at a parents' evening, what would you say to them to say, look, this is a brilliant job?
It is.
What would you say?
I mean, I don't have to sell HR to most of the people listening, I'm sure. But for me, working in HR is impactful, right? You've got the power to have a positive impact on somebody's working life or a not so positive impact on somebody's working life. And that is huge. We work in organizations, most people, more than they spend time with their own families and friends, more than personal time, right? The only thing that beats us on time spent is sleep. So if we're going to spend all of these hours in a place, doing a job, being productive, there needs to be that purpose and that value there. And I think that as HR people, it's the best job in the world to remind everyone of how we're doing collectively and how we're achieving collectively and really supporting people through difficult times. HR is there. I think it's a brilliant job and it's really impactful. There are not many jobs out there that are as diverse as HR. One day you could be dealing with, an EDI issue. The next day you're working on recruitment retention strategies. There's so much variation in the role. You never get bored. You also never seem to catch up, I think. But it's a very varied role. If you're a person like me who kind of the mundane, doing the same task day in and day out, that can get really I get really anxious when I'm bored. My mind kind of wanders. I'm not as productive as I could be. But when you've got this like varying role and you're being inspired by people all the time, that for me is what sells HR. I love it.
Great. And what are some of the skills that even like someone at school could be developing now that would be useful?
Oh gosh, yeah, the transferable skills.
Yeah, what would be the kind of standout ones that you see in your members? You think, oh yeah, actually, young people could be developing those now.
When I first started working in London retail, one of the initiatives was we wanted to identify the customers that came into the store. And I was working in L&D at the time, and I thought, how can I ask these sales associates to identify traits about a customer when they're not really self-aware about their own traits? So I brought everyone on the team in and I made them all do a Myers-Briggs test, right?
Okay, yeah.
This was the first time some of these kids, I mean, let's face it, they were quite young. Some of them still working or still going to university, some of them foreign. And this was like the first time they'd had that sense of like self-awareness. But I thought, if I expect them to communicate effectively to someone, they need to understand what kind of communicator they are. And having some like awareness of this is really important. And Myers-Briggs is a good indicator of your communication style. So we did this, and then they were very quickly like shocked at how accurate the results were about who they were. They'd never done anything like this before. And so I think for kids today, even younger ones, like having that sense of self-awareness about how they prefer to learn, how they prefer to communicate, what their communication style is, and then how they can adapt that to other people because they recognize in another person what their communication style is, what their personality is like. And then once you start adapting your communication to match your audience, I mean, that is a transferable skill that'll work for you in any sector, any industry, and certainly in HR.
Brilliant. That's great. Good. So you've got a busy job with CIPD, a lot of traveling about, going to events, organizing huge conferences.
Yeah. Oh God, don't remind me.
It's too soon after the last one, maybe, is it? The scars are still fresh. But you that like I just get that since I've known you, that is really life-giving for you. But what when you do get a bit anxious or burned out or a bit repetitive and you just get a bit like, how do you just enjoy yourself when you're not working? Like, what are the sort of things that you...
So as we talked about before, when I pulled up in my beach van, I am an avid sea swimmer all year round. So there is no stop for me. I love to go sea swimming. It clears my mind. I think there's something about the near-death feeling you get of being in sub-zero freezing waters and just breathing. Just breathe. That's the only thing you can do, really. So yeah, that's how I would, unwind, sort of decompress. And actually, it gives me real clarity of mind. So it's very good. Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
Have you been in the sea, in the Irish Sea? Come on.
I have, but I don't try to make it habit. But so yeah, it's just no. It's
Is it just
not,
like a Boxing Day thing for you?
Not even a Boxing Day thing. Even the middle of July on something like Port Stewart Strand, it's still tough to get past your ankles. Yeah. I leave it to people who are much braver than I anyway. But as we wrap up today, Susan, we love hearing what's so great about work for you and the impact you have. Just tell us what's so great about work for you.
I mean, I think the diversity of the work again is inspirational. People that I work with. But really what's so great about work is I have such flexibility that when my kids are this young, I have the time and the opportunity to watch them grow up and to give them that attention when they need it. So I think that's really important for me at this point. But also, that's why I do this job, right? I don't want my kids to face the same challenges that I had when I entered the world of work. And I really aim to make this a better world for them. So yeah, doing this job really enables that mission. My purpose is really clear.
That's great. Well, and not just for your children, but for every child.
Yeah.
The better working world will be good for them when they prepare to leave school and move beyond that. So thank you so much for your time. Great to chat with you today.
That's great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Workplus. If today's story gave you fresh perspective or helped you rethink what's possible, leave us a review on your favourite podcast platform or hit like and subscribe. It really does make a big difference. For more stories, resources, and tools to help guide the next generation, visit workplus.app. Until next time.